Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the Women in Medicine Summit, a transformational CME conference happening September 13th to 14th at the Drake Hotel in Chicago. Engage in leadership programming, learn negotiation skills, receive on-site coaching and mentoring, and see who will win this year's I Stand With Her awards. This year, we're excited to offer unique programming that includes a special session on how using improv comedy can bring fun back into medicine. We also have financial sessions tailored to help you navigate the complexities of personal and professional finances. Discover ways to advance into leadership roles, combat burnout, and either reignite your love for your current role or find joy in a new career path. Don't forget our Friday evening gala, a highlight this year you definitely won't want to miss. Register now at womeninmedicinesummit.org and be part of the movement that is shaping the future of healthcare. Join us to network, learn, and celebrate the power of women in medicine.
I remember learning about the reference man a few years ago. The reference man is defined as being between 20 to 30 years of age, weighing 70 kilograms, and is 170 centimeters or about 6 feet in height. The reference man has permeated nearly every medical, scientific, and industry advancement in the modern era. They use the reference man when they design crash test dummies, which then impact the way car seats and seatbelts are designed. It may not seem like that's a big deal, but the result of that became evident to me when I worked in a level 1 trauma center. Prior to working at the trauma center, I had never seen or heard of a patient that was ejected from a car with their seatbelt on. I saw the results of that several times working at this level 1 trauma center. Interestingly and sadly, every person that I saw that was ejected from their car with their seatbelt on was a small woman. I got curious and I looked in the literature and I began to see that women are less likely to be involved in trauma, but when they are involved specifically in motor vehicle crashes, they have a higher risk of injury and death, partially related to the design of cars, specifically the seats and the seat belts that do not hold them as tightly as the men that they were designed to hold. It's weird to think that when we move through the world, that we actually have a higher risk of morbidity and mortality simply by the car seat that we get into. The idea of a world designed by men has impacted myself and my guest today, Dr. Wagner, very personally. As doctors, we've both experienced a lot of gender bias, and it's certainly changed our career trajectories. What I'm happy to report is we are both working, me at Revitalize and her at Prosper, to make the reference man a thing of the past. We believe that when companies actually think about how to design a work environment that is conducive to women, that it's not going to be just about making the individual woman's experience better. It's going to transform their lives and transform the culture and performance of that industry. It is no secret right now that there are some really big problems in medicine and other industries. This is a very disruptive time in history. It's time that we start shifting from thinking that women are part of the problem to 100% women are part of the solution. You're not going to want to miss this conversation with my guest today, Dr. Jen Wagner. She has expertise in medicine, athletics, and business leadership. With a career spanning over 20 years in medicine and human performance, and having honed her skills during her tenure at Stanford University, Dr. Wagner has emerged as a renowned expert in health span and lifespan. Her contributions are not limited to academia, as she's also made a significant impact as a partner at Liminal Collective. In addition, Dr. Wagner's ability to coordinate high acuity healthcare teams has been sought after by prestigious organizations, including the U.S. Olympic Committee, NBA, elite military units, healthcare teams, esports, and creative performers. Her versatile skills and extensive experience have solidified her reputation as a true leader in her field. I am so thankful to have Dr. Wagner on the show, and I really hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome to the Revitalizing Doctor podcast. We interview trailblazers in medicine that embody the Revitalize Women vision to empower women to innovate and influence medicine, to value authenticity, respect, and work-life harmony. We recognize the challenges in medicine, and we're committed to providing coaching-informed strategies to help you go from surviving to thriving. I am so excited today to have Dr. Jen Wagner with me. So Jen, great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Your life story is very interesting. What did you do before you became a doctor?
I was a soccer player before I became a doctor. So I grew up playing soccer and actually riding horses. And in high school, I was really fortunate to have an amazing team, which I think kind of set the tone for the rest of my life. The group I played with, we started to play together when we were in 5th grade, I think. And we all decided to go to private high school together so we could continue to be our core team. And then I went to college on a soccer scholarship and played for Clemson and finished a little early, and then got a master's in exercise physiology and then on to med school.
Now that I have been ever so slightly exposed to the performance world and listen to all these amazing podcasts with people that do exercise physiology, what made you go to medical school? Because I mean, that could have been its own path and trajectory.
It's kind of funny. I think that was a detour, actually. I decided I wanted to be a doctor when I was 10 or 11 years old. No one in my family was in medicine. I had an uncle that was a vet, and I thought that was super interesting, that he could take things that were broken and fix them and give people back their most precious creatures at that time. Because, I didn't have kids. I didn't understand that maternal feeling, but we had pets. And so I was really fascinated with that. So when I was really young, I thought I wanted to be a vet. And then as I got into school, and my mom was a science teacher, and she would talk to me about things, I was like, I really want to be a doctor. I think that is just amazing that you can take somebody that is sick and know how to fix them and get them back to what they want to do. So I think I was fortunate enough that I finished college a little bit early. And so I had this kind of year where I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And so I ended up doing my master's in that time frame, kind of on my journey to medical school, which was pretty much always the plan.
Medical school is so all-encompassing. I think about the sleep deprivation that we had, and more in residency, for me at least, than medical school. With your performance background, what were you thinking when you were walking around the halls of the hospital and you're seeing, all these sleep-deprived doctors, and we're eating, at least for me, fried chicken in the cafeteria? It's so, looking back on it now with what I know about health and well-being, it's so weird.
I think the interesting thing is, I think as, healthcare has evolved, the performance field's evolved. So I can't say we knew everything back then that we know now. It was still, you push training, you didn't prioritize recovery. We didn't prioritize recovery when I was an athlete. We didn't prioritize nutrition when I was an athlete. And even through my exercise physiology training, we prioritized assessing, and we got into a little bit of nutrition when we were working with older populations. But with athletes, it was still, how hard can we push? And when they break, we knew we went too far. And so I think this whole idea of the importance of sleep and recovery, even in the performance space, is relatively recent. That we realize, when we give athletes or any elite performer time to recover and rest, their performance is actually better. It's actually not a negative. I think those fields have evolved in a very parallel fashion. So I'm not sure I was aware of it. I think just from my personal bias, I was like, gosh, I don't sleep enough and I eat terribly. But when you're running from one patient to the next in the emergency room, or I had 5 minutes between cases in the operating room, you ate whatever you could find.
Right.
I still have to remember to sit down and eat. My husband and I, who's also an anesthesiologist, we're the two fastest eaters we know. Our kids sit there and go, how are you guys already done? And so it's still, 20 plus years later, a skill to remember to chew your food and sit down and enjoy a meal instead of just scarfing down whatever's in front of you.
So tell our audience what you do now.
So in 2021, I left my clinical practice and I became a partner at a group called the Liminal Collective, which is the most amazing crew of humans I could have ever imagined being in a room with, from this former director of performance at Red Bull to Nike executives and to the creative director at Cirque du Soleil and former Special Forces Navy SEAL operator. That's who I got to spend my days with to talk about having a little bit of imposter syndrome. And so I spent 2 years with that group really learning and helping groups embrace what performance means, which was really holistic in our approach, that we wanted people to understand how they could show up every day. So it meant really taking a deep dive into who they were and all of the systems that affect how we show up in our daily lives. And so I spent 2 years with that team, which was amazing, and got to meet just amazing groups of people. And then about 6 months ago, we've spun out a separate company from that group called Prosper that is really focused on women and women's performance, because through all of the arenas I've been fortunate enough to play in my life, I feel like that has been a gaping hole, that whether I was an athlete, nobody taught us how to lift weights appropriately as women. And we just had the men's strength coaches, if we were lucky to have one, and we just put lighter weights on. But we did the same exercises as the men. No one taught us about nutrition and what we should be eating based on our physiology. Same thing through med school. As you all know, everything's based on a 70 or 75 kilo man. All the research is based on men, and we extrapolate it to women and we think it's going to work. We extrapolate it to kids and we think it's going to work. And I felt the same in the performance community, that we didn't really address 50% of our audience, and we weren't asking questions that were specific to their needs and their experiences. And so that's the design of Prosper, is how can we go into these different environments and really help women feel optimized to face whatever challenges lie ahead of them.
It's so fascinating and really important work. And the thing I've been struggling with a lot lately is people will ask, why should I do this? Especially in healthcare right now, reimbursements are down, costs are up, everyone's looking to save money. What's the business argument? Beyond the moral and ethical one, which I wish that's all it was, because that should be a slam dunk.
I think that's a really good question. And that's one that our team has had to work really hard on, because it's challenging to create a company around something that hasn't really been done before and explain the value of that. But I think when we've reverse engineered that argument, and there's some good data around this. So there's a fallout. Let's just take female physicians, and you're probably very familiar with this data, that about 6 years post-residency, about 40% of them are ready to leave or significantly. So to take a female physician who is 6 years post-residency who walked out, it costs an organization about $1 million to replace her. And that doesn't account for the non-financial value that she is bringing to an institution from a patient. That doesn't take into account patient safety, that she knows the system. She knows the medical record. She knows how to function in the environment. That doesn't take into account the team dynamics of which she was a part of. So just the financial cost to the institution is about $1 million. And that doesn't even take into the financial cost of training the next physician through medical school, residency, and onboarding them onto that institution. So there is a huge financial cost to healthcare organizations to lose their mid-career women. The other financial cost of that is then you have less women in the pool to be promoted to leadership positions. So then there's less culture change in the organization to support women, because there's this massive dropout of them at a crucial period of time. And, there's some really interesting statistics, even from non-physician clinicians. You look at the nursing literature, you look at the other types of clinicians involved in healthcare. Early on, 70% of manager positions are held by women. And when you go up the ranks, it drops to about 13% in the C-suite of healthcare administration. And so there's a huge financial component to losing women along that trajectory. That's our argument into these organizations, that yes, there is an expense to invest, but it is a fraction of what it costs to lose one physician.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Are you a physician mom with school-aged children feeling utterly exhausted? My friend Dr. Sheeta Shaffi invites you to take a little time this summer to join her in a small, intimate group for meaningful conversations. Dr. Shaffi is an emergency physician, coach, and mom to 8-year-old twins. She understands firsthand what you're going through. This isn't a pizza party or a yoga class. You'll meet for 2 one-hour sessions twice a month starting in July to help you move out of exhaustion, let go of mom guilt, and live a life you're not only proud of, but can truly enjoy. Connect with her on LinkedIn or Instagram at Sheeta Shaffi to learn more. Sheeta is spelled Shideh, and Shaffi is spelled Shafie. You can also check the show notes for a link so you can connect with her there as well. Yeah, definitely. And the thing that I've been thinking a lot with healthcare, but I think it matters in a lot of other industries right now, is we're going through this huge disruptive period of history. The way that we've done things hasn't been working. We have data that women tend to be more collaborative. And I think this next phase of healthcare, tech, whatever industry you want to put in there, the old formula of the boys club and patriarchy, hierarchy, we've already done it. And here we are with a lot of different messes that we're going to have to clean up.
No, I agree. There's great data out of MIT that really shows when you have more women on a team, that team is more efficient, more successful, and more productive. A lot of that comes from, as women, we have had to find creative and innovative strategies to get where we want to be. It's not always a simple line. And so when you have more women sitting at the table, or have more thought diversity sitting at the table, there are more innovative and creative strategies to solve those problems. And so it's continuing to support that journey to get that thought diversity at the table, and to get those people who have really had to fight and blaze an alternative path to get there. They tend to have more resiliency and be able to think outside the box in a much broader fashion.
When I think about if I had a magic wand to fix one thing right now across the board for women, even though I don't have children, it would be the motherhood penalty. What has been your experience personally? And then what are some, now that you're interacting with all of these various companies, what are some things that they could do, they could start tomorrow that would make a substantial difference?
That's a great question. And it's interesting. I had my first daughter. I have 2 children who are now 13 and 15. I had my first daughter right at the end of my CA2 year in residency, which for me was my 5th year of residency. And I erupted in the operating room because I had been probably working a schedule that was not compatible with being 8 months pregnant. And so she was about 5 weeks early, and she did great, but was sitting in the hospital in which I worked. My husband also worked there. We were sitting in the cafeteria because she was in the NICU for a couple days, and everyone walked by myself and said, "Oh my gosh, when are you coming back to work, and who's going to watch the baby?" And everyone walked by my husband and said, "Congratulations." And it took me years to reflect back on that, but that kind of set the tone for the guilt I felt leaving. I was back at work before my actual due date. The guilt I felt leaving my premature child every day to go back in an environment where I had no control over my schedule. I had no control over when I was going to go home every day. I had no say or power in that. the guilt I felt in trying to find someone else. We had kids to have a family, and all of a sudden I was paying someone else to raise my children for me. And so I think it was those little comments over time. And it was not just men saying those things. That was just society. Congrats, you're a dad. To the mom, oh my gosh, what are you going to do? And so it just, even though I have the most supportive partner and co-parent ever. And in fact, because I was still a resident and he was finished, he did a lot more of the parenting initially than I even did. But yet how we were addressed in society was very different. And I think that over years and years really weighs on women, kind of regardless of their situation. And I think women who choose not to have children are equally judged in a different manner. And so it doesn't mean that they don't also feel this societal pressure. It just comes from a different place. So, and then, when I did have to make career decisions around my family, it was hard. I think personally, back to what you and I have talked to before, when you're told you can have it all and realize you can't, you feel like a failure. I had great women mentors, but I didn't ask them the right question. I didn't ask them how to deal with those feelings of when I needed to ask for a different schedule or a different level of flexibility, or I always felt like I was asking for special privilege instead of just advocating for myself. And so I think that if I could change one thing, it would be that. It would be when anyone needs to advocate for themselves to be able to improve their life, we need to change the stigma around that conversation. We all have experiences and circumstances in life that come up, whether it's having to take care of an elderly parent, whatever the situation is, we all have external factors that impact our work life. And, I think doctors even calling in sick when you don't feel well, there's so much stigma associated with that. That would be my magic wand, is to remove the stigma around those conversations, because at the end of the day, people will show up at work better and they will continue to show up for many more years in their career. If in those moments of when they really need something, we listen without judgment.
No, I'm 100% there with you. Is I think I called in sick in 10 years, really once. It was when I got COVID. And then a week or two after that, I no longer work at this institution. The department had sent out a message saying that if you get sick, if you have COVID, you have better have exhausted every option before you message me. And it's so egregious, right? Because there have been a few times in my life where I've actually been so physically ill that I could barely pick up a phone. And you're not thinking clearly, if you sometimes with a high fever or whatever, but yet when you keep demanding that, doctors find a solution. And at a place where this was at a time during the pandemic, if you posted a shift, nobody was taking it. Just everyone was so fried. I mean, that's the part that's really gotten me, is that we don't have any redundancy built into the system. And I honestly think a lot of that comes from the patriarchy, that they have a model in which there are people sometimes helping them with their lives at home. So if they have to come in and pick up another shift, they don't feel it as much. But I hope that this is changing, but it's just not happening fast enough.
It's not. And I think that the financial pressures in healthcare are so real. I look at the last institution I was in, big academic institution, and what they've done to the surgical schedule is crazy. The hours in which they will let elective cases continue, or how they will let elective cases schedule, it's impossible to staff appropriately. And you just think about the impact that has, that it's become a nonstop machine, and the humanity is dwindling down. And it's very much that attitude of, well, if you can't be here, you better find someone to be here for you, instead of saying, I'm killing my staff. I'm killing the people that are boots on the ground and literally killing. I mean, the amount of catastrophic events I've seen from healthcare providers in their own health and demise is terrible. The correlation between what is going on in the workplace has to be very significant to that, but there is no time to care for yourself. And you've been taught to not prioritize self-care for so long.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel very fortunate in a way because I was military. I didn't have the student debt, but now I interact with a lot of my residents. It used to be 250,000 was a lot of debt. Now it's not uncommon for some of them to tell me they have $400,000 or $500,000 in debt. And I can't help but think like that it's creating this almost like they feel like they're an indentured servant because the debt is so high that they don't think they can actually leave. And in a way, the system's kind of told them like, no, you're stuck. So I don't know. With that, we've painted kind of a dark picture. Let's try to pull back a little bit. With the work that you're doing at Prosper, obviously a lot of my listeners are doctors and in the healthcare industry. Where's the light coming in? What's making you optimistic about how we're able to start changing this paradigm?
One is I think organizations are starting to see it. And I agree with you, the progress is slow. But I think that, we've been contacted by some amazing organizations across industries to say, this is really important to us. And I think a big goal of Prosper is like, we don't want to be the Band-Aid. We don't want to put a Band-Aid on the problem and not work on the root cause of it. And so we've had some really challenging conversations with organizations to say, we love coming in and working with individuals and giving individuals tools to help them feel optimized and feel better about going into the arenas in which they work or compete in. But we want to make sure the cultures of those arenas support the foundation that we're teaching the operators in those arenas how to use. And so I think it is really encouraging that people, one, recognize that there is an issue, and two, are willing to invest in it to change. And so I've been really encouraged by a lot of the conversations that we've had with people of all genders who are really wanting to change the narrative around this and really improve things. And so I think that is really a positive. And then when you get to interact with these women who are really investing in themselves and they see progress and you see them walk out with their head held high and their shoulders back and walking back into the world more confident and feeling like they can actually handle more, it's really, really rewarding. And it's a different type of service than what I did before, but you get that same kind of reward as you do of taking care of patients.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the change you've made, the ripples and the waves, not just ripples, that it's going to be so wonderful.
Yeah.
So I do want to take some time and with all of your performance background, knowing that we've got a lot of women doctors that maybe have a call shift coming up. They've got 24 hours. What is your top nutrition tip?
I saw these were going to be hard for me. I think one, be kind to yourself, right? So I think if you can plan ahead a little bit, we each have our go-to things that fuel us the way we like to be fueled. But I also think that it's okay to not stick to like these really, really strict regimens. But I feel like if you can prepare ahead of time a little bit to then when you go to reach for that bag of chips because it's easy, you've prepared something else that you can reach for. I think that really, really helps. So I know for myself, like I make a smoothie the night before and stick it in the fridge, or I create a snack. This summer, it's been really trying to work on my protein intake because I know that's really hard for most women. We do not take in adequate amounts of protein. So making some tuna salad or some egg salad before. So I actually have something that I enjoy that is prepared and I can reach for. And that keeps me from ordering the chicken tenders and fries in the cafeteria because it's fast and I know it's going to be fulfilling. That's my number one is like, I think if we can find the time to take the prep on the front side, it makes when you only have 5 minutes between patients and you go to reach for something, you've already established what it is and it's there for you.
I love that. Yep. I got to get back on the meal prep train. What's your top sleep tip?
Again, I tend to take everything into moderation. I am probably not as strict as many people in the performance field. You're going to have a bad night of sleep. And so if you can do everything you can to optimize between those bad nights of sleep, you're in a good spot. So this is probably where I would say boundaries become really, really important. I think especially for women who have fluctuating schedules, like women in medicine who have call shifts, et cetera. So when you're not on call, really sticking to your regimen, that you have a bedtime routine, you've set your environment well. So, there are a few things you can do every night. Wind down, have a cool bedroom, have it dark and have it quiet, and really prioritize that in your life. And if you can prioritize that hour before you go to bed as your time and stick to that routine, which then will eventually lead to better and better night's sleep, I think that's the best we can do, because on our call nights, we have no control. And so I think that's probably the best thing you can do, that if on the days that you're not on call, sleep becomes an absolute priority in your life.
I really like that tip, because as a recovering perfectionist, if I have one bad night, I'm like, oh my God, it's going to throw the whole day, but I've been trying to tell myself recently, well, you're pretty good. I mean, probably 80% or more of the nights you're getting what you need. So if you have a bad night here or there, it's really not the end of the world.
And every sleep expert I've talked to, that's their biggest takeaway message, because I think we panic, especially when it's something we're working on. And so we're so focused on it. Let yourself off the hook a little bit.
Is there any books that you would recommend specifically on women's health and performance, knowing that so much of the performance literature has been based off of the test male?
A book I love that I've read twice recently is The Female Brain. It's just fantastic. And I don't know if you've read it. It's an older book and she's just re-released it. It's really fascinating. I think as physicians, because we are women, it defaults that we know all of this about our own physiology and biology and how we change with age. I knew none of it, or very, very much the tip of the surface. And I think it was an educational book for me, an eye-opening book for me about how little I knew about how all of my changing hormonal levels and physiology really impacts my cognition and my decision-making and my life. It's almost embarrassing to say I didn't know about that. But, I think that reflects back on how little women's health were actually taught through medical school. And unless you get very, very subspecialized, and I even think those physicians who do that almost have to go to external, non-traditional medical educational sources to get that type of training, because it's new and it's pushing the edge, and it's not necessarily the tried and true traditional medical training that we've had. And so I thought that book was really eye-opening, and it's kind of fun to read. It's not super technical, so it's pretty enjoyable to read. Like I said, I've read it twice recently. I just really enjoyed it. The other book I read recently, The Confidence Code, which was really helpful about women's approach to confidence. It really does touch every aspect of performance, I would say, and just how talks a lot about, the self-talk that we have in our brains and how we relate confidence to competence and how competence shows up for us in different areas of our lives differently than men. And I thought that was a really, again, kind of like, oh, I'm not the only one that feels this way. It was a little bit validating about a lot of the talk I tend to have on a day in, day out basis. Because I think especially as perfectionists and professional women, we don't like to show that vulnerability a lot of the time. And we don't share that side of us very often. And so it can feel very lonely, and it can feel like I'm the only one in this situation. And so I thought both of those books really almost encouraged me to talk about some of these issues with women that I hadn't really felt comfortable talking about before.
I would love to have you back, or if you have a recommendation on somebody that we can talk more about women's physiology and hormone fluctuations. It's so funny to me. I'm working on my book right now, and I suffered from dysmenorrhea for a really long time. When I would get it, almost in every month, I'd be like, oh my God, like, do I have a kidney stone? Like, I would think some catastrophic thing was happening. And then it would take me like a day to realize I'm having my period. And I was so disconnected from my own physiology. And I also think because it's always been talked about in a negative way, it's like, this thing's happening to me and it's gross, it's weird, it's not what my male colleagues are going through. So I'm just going to ignore it. Where now I'm starting to, read about progesterone and estrogen and the way it affects our brain and all this. And I'm like, why aren't we taught this to be able to leverage it, to be able to understand it? Because it's going to happen. These hormones are going to change throughout the month. So why are we just ignoring it?
And, it's so interesting that you say that, because it has been this taboo subject. And it's funny, I have 2 teenage daughters. And so this has become forefront in our lives. And I realized no one ever talked to me about what was happening to me when I, went through puberty and started my period. And I looked at the girls and I said, let's talk about this. And when you feel bad, let's have a conversation about this and let's figure out how we deal with this. Both my daughters are really competitive athletes, and the implications of, even this push, not have girls wear white shorts anymore. It really does need to become more of a forefront conversation, and even 10 times more important in medical education and how we even talk about this as women in medicine, because I was shocked at how little I knew until I started reading about it and learning about it and listening to podcasts and taking courses. I was like, you get a couple weeks in your OBGYN rotation where you talk about the menstrual cycle and you learn a little bit about pregnancy. And then people talk about menopause and they're like, oh yeah, your period stops. And that's really, it's not much more detailed than that. And and no one talks about women's health as a continuum. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a huge opportunity to really improve medical education and really improve the conversations that are around this and help our teams inside and outside of medicine function better when we all understand what we're going through. And even the self-realization some days, I'm like, I now can understand physiologically what's happening to me. So I better know how to respond to those cues, that maybe today's not the day I schedule a really important emotional meeting because I know I'm not going to be at my best. Or developing tools to say, I don't have a choice but to have this meeting today. I know I am doing, my trigger threshold is lower, or whatever happens to me personally, and learning ways to navigate that to still perform at an optimal level. And I think as women, we have to separate optimization and excellence from perfection. They're different. What my best is today may not be what my best is tomorrow. I might be better, or I might be doing my best, and that's a much lower functioning level. And to give ourselves some grace around that.
Well, this has been a delight, and we've just scratched the surface. I can't wait to have you back I'd love to do a deep dive on the hormones, physiology, and then I know we've talked about it offline, metrics like the Whoop device or Aura to incorporate some more objective feedback when we're trying to optimize our health. In the meantime, how can our listeners connect with you and with Prosper?
Absolutely. Thank you. So our website is weprosper.co, and my email there is jen@weprosper.co. And you can follow myself and Prosper on LinkedIn, and you can follow myself and or Prosper on Instagram. And we would love to hear from people. We love just having these conversations and continuing to get this messaging out and connect with people who are interested about learning more about this space and what we can do.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to The Revitalizing Doctor, a project of Revitalize Women Physician Circle. Our mission is to connect women physicians and allies through innovative, value-based coaching methods that align trust, support, accountability, and skill development to ignite the courage and clarity necessary to take bold actions, create change, and thrive. If you're interested in working with us, check out our website at peoplealwayshcc.com/revitalize or email us at revitalizemmm heartline.info@gmail.com. This podcast represents the views of our host and guest. It does not reflect the views of any institution we work for or with.
Hi, it's Dr. Risa E. Lewis, dropping in to tell you about a book that Dr. Adara Landry and I wrote. It's called Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact. It's a business self-help book coming in 2024 by HarperCollins. Pre-order now. Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact, wherever you buy your books.